Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another fascinating chapter of history. Today, we're looking at the lives of immigrants in Scotland.
Should be interesting.
You bet. And we've got some amazing historical excerpts to guide us.
Looking forward to those. What groups are we talking about?
Well, we've got stories about Catholic, Irish, Protestant Irish, Italians, Jewish people, and Lithuanians.
A real mix.
It is. And what strikes me is that even though these groups came from such different places and backgrounds, they often faced surprisingly similar challenges.
I see that. Trying to build a life in a new country, it comes with its own set of obstacles, no matter who you are.
Exactly. And that's what makes these individual stories so powerful.
The human side of history, right?
Exactly. It's not just about dates and statistics. It's about understanding how these communities shaped Scotland and how Scotland shaped them in return.
Love that.
Yeah.
So, where do we start?
Well, let's begin with the Irish.
Yeah.
Their arrival in the 19th century really set the stage for so much that followed. It was a huge wave of immigration.
It was. And it's key to remember, Irish wasn't one single category. Catholic and Protestant Irish immigrants, their experiences, they were often worlds apart.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're talking about internal divisions within an immigrant group.
Yeah, and it often mirrored the religious tensions that were already simmering in Scotland.
So let's unpack that a bit. What were some of the key differences?
Well, for a lot of the Catholic Irish, the language was a massive hurdle. Many arrived speaking Gaelic.
And that limited their job options.
Big time. They often ended up in low-skilled, backbreaking work.
Building roads, canals.
Railways, all the stuff that was fueling Scotland's industrial growth.
And I can imagine that didn't exactly make them popular with Scottish workers.
Yeah.
Competition for jobs can breed resentment.
Absolutely. And there was this added layer of the poor law system.
Right, the safety net of the time, but not exactly a generous one.
It was seen as a last resort, and many Scots felt that the Catholic Irish, by accepting lower wages, were pushing them closer to needing that help.
So it wasn't just about jobs, it was about dignity and social standing.
Exactly. And then on top of all that, you had the religious divide. The no popery sentiment was incredibly strong in Scotland back then.
No popery. That really sums up the feeling at the time, doesn't it?
It does. And there were organizations like the Scottish Reformation Society actively campaigning against Catholic influence, especially in education. Their slogan, "No Rome on the rates," says it all. They did not want their taxes funding Catholic schools.
Wow, no Rome on the rates. Talk about a catchy slogan.
It certainly got the point across. And it's crazy to think that the Scottish Protestant League actually won seats in Glasgow's government.
A city with a huge Catholic Irish population.
Exactly. Shows you how deep those sentiments ran.
It really does. But hold on, didn't Catholics and Protestants find some common ground through the temperance movement?
Yeah, that's an interesting twist. Both the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches were really against excessive drinking.
Right. Threat to families, to society.
To productivity, even. So, the temperance movement, it kind of gave them a shared cause.
Makes sense. And we see that in some of the images from that time, thousands marching together for temperance in Glasgow.
Amazing visual, isn't it? This moment of unity.
Really is.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the negative stereotypes about the Catholic Irish, they didn't just vanish.
No, not at all. They were often blamed for outbreaks of diseases like typhus, called Irish fever, as if it was somehow their fault.
Wow, Irish fever.
And they were seen as drunkards and brawlers, reinforcing all the prejudices that were already out there.
It's crazy how those negative perceptions can stick,
Yeah.
even when they're not true. But wait, we can't forget that the Protestant Irish, they had a different story.
Oh yeah, totally different. Coming over with more skills and education, they weren't facing the same struggles.
Makes sense. Protestant faith aligning with the majority in Scotland,
Yeah.
that definitely helped them integrate.
No doubt about it. Companies like Baird's of Gartshire, they employed loads of skilled Protestant Irish workers. Engineering, management roles. They weren't stuck at the bottom rung of society like many Catholic Irish were.
Okay, so that's fascinating. A different experience, even within the same broad Irish label. But even the Protestant Irish, they had their own complexities.
Right. We can't forget about the Orange Order.
A powerful symbol of their identity.
But also a source of tension. Remember that attack on Orangemen in Airdrie in 1857?
Led to their marches being banned.
Exactly. Shows you, even within the Irish immigrant experience, there were cracks and divisions.
A reminder that individual stories matter. We can't just lump everyone into the same category.
Absolutely. And speaking of individual stories, up next we've got the Italians, and they bring their own unique flavor to the mix.
Oh, can't wait to hear about them. They're often associated with those classic fish and chip shops, right?
They are. But their story, trust me, it's got more twists and turns than a plate of spaghetti.
All right, you've got my attention. What should we know about them? I'll admit I do love a good chippy. But you're saying there's more to the Italian immigrant story than just fish and chips.
Oh, way more. It's a story of ambition and prejudice, cultural clashes, and a constant search for belonging.
Sounds pretty intense. Where do we even begin?
Well, picture Scotland in the late 19th century. Cities booming, especially Glasgow. It was a magnet for immigrants, all chasing a better life. And the Italians, they saw a gap in the market.
For fish and chips? Or was it something else?
Both, actually, but maybe even more popular ice cream? By 1905, Glasgow alone had over 300 Italian cafes, many of them serving up these treats.
Wow, 300. I guess people really love their ice cream.
They did. And think about it, back then, working-class Scots didn't have many affordable treats. A penny for a poke of chips or a scoop of ice cream, it was a little bit of luxury.
Right, a little escape from the daily grind. It's interesting how food can be such a gateway into a new culture.
It really is. And those cafes, they weren't just about the food. They had this warm atmosphere, became social hubs, places where people from all walks of life could mingle. A real melting pot.
I can picture it. Those classic Italian ice cream parlors, all ornate and colorful. They must have added a splash of vibrancy to the industrial landscape.
They did. Places like Nardini's, still a landmark today, became symbols of success for the Italian community. And it wasn't just ice cream either. Think of Vincent Coia, the baker.
What about him?
He tapped into the football craze, supplied his pies to predict the thistle matches. Smart, right? He understood the local culture and found a way to make his own mark.
Brilliant. But I bet not everyone was thrilled with their success.
You're right, there was tension, economic and religious. Some Scottish shopkeepers saw these late-night Italian businesses as unfair competition. And then there was Sunday trading.
Ah, yes. The age-old clash of commerce and the Sabbath.
Exactly. For many in the Protestant majority, opening a shop on Sunday was a big no-no. And some saw those late-night crowds at the Italian cafes, the only places open after pubs closed, as, well, let's just say, not very respectable.
I can imagine. What do they call them? Dens of iniquity?
Even worse, ice cream hell. Can you believe it? All that outrage over some scoops of gelato?
Ice cream hell. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. It makes you wonder what things we get all worked up about today that'll seem ridiculous in the future.
It does, doesn't it? But it shows how deeply these cultural and religious differences ran. And of course, with the Italians being Catholic, that added another layer of tension.
So once again, religion becomes a flashpoint. Any attempts to bridge that divide?
Actually, yes. The British Women's Temperance Association, they were campaigning against alcohol, and they saw Sunday trading as part of the problem. So their solution, open their own coffee shops on Sundays.
Talk about fighting fire with fire, or should I say, coffee with gelato. But seriously, that's fascinating. It shows how these social movements could get tangled up with issues of immigration and culture.
Absolutely, it's all connected. And it shows how complex those issues were. Take Leopold Giuliani, for example. He owned a bunch of ice cream parlors in the early 1900s, and he got criticized for hiring mostly Italians, even when jobs were scarce for Scots.
Yeah, I can see how that would cause resentment, even among those who loved his ice cream.
It did. It raised questions about loyalty, about who benefited from immigrant labor. Tough questions with no easy answers.
It's a reminder that even something as simple as buying a scoop of ice cream can have all these social and economic implications.
Exactly. But despite all this, Italian immigrants found their place, especially in the hairdressing industry. In fact, they even established the College of Italian Hairdressers in 1928.
Wow, so they really made their mark. A classic story of perseverance and success despite the obstacles.
It is a story full of contradictions. But it shows us the immigrant experience, it's never simple. It's a constant push and pull, shaped by ambition, societal pressures, and this constant exchange of cultures.
And speaking of cultural exchange, our next group, the Jewish community, they created a really vibrant hub in Glasgow's Gorbals district.
They did. By 1914, about 10,000 Jewish people had settled there. It was like a little slice of Eastern Europe, right in the heart of Glasgow. Bustling streets, Yiddish everywhere. You could practically smell the traditional food.
This sounds amazing. What drew them to Scotland in the first place?
Well, like many immigrants, they were escaping persecution, poverty, looking for religious freedom and better opportunities. And Scotland, with its growing industries, seemed like a good bet.
And the Gorbals, with its affordable housing and tight-knit community, it was a natural place to settle.
It was, and they built a whole world there. Synagogues, schools, businesses, social clubs, all catering to their community. A real testament to their resilience.
But I'm guessing they weren't immune to the prejudices we've seen with other groups?
Sadly, no. Their success in the tailoring industry, for example, led to accusations of undercutting wages, exploiting workers. That sweatshop image, it became a damaging stereotype.
Yes. The classic blame the outsider tactic. Never gets old, does it?
Sadly, no. And it went beyond just jobs. Some Jewish residents were even excluded from certain bowling clubs. Can you believe that?
Wow. Really? Just for being Jewish?
Yep. Which is why they ended up founding their own, the Bonnyton Jewish Golf Club, in 1928.
Talk about turning discrimination into opportunity. It's inspiring, really. They created their own spaces, their own institutions, when others shut them out.
Exactly. And that self-reliance extended to how they handled social welfare. They had their own organizations, like a boot and clothing guild, to support their members. That way, they could avoid relying on the poor law system.
Smart. They knew it was better to rely on themselves than on a system that wasn't always friendly to outsiders. But I imagine as their community grew, so did the anxieties among certain parts of Scottish society.
You're right. And the media at the time didn't help. Newspapers like the Daily Record would run headlines about the alien danger, stirring up fears about jobs, cultural differences, that kind of thing.
Ugh, the media can be so irresponsible sometimes. It's like they forget they have a responsibility to report fairly and accurately.
It's true. But despite all this negativity, the Jewish community continued to thrive. They even built the South Portland Street Synagogue, a stunning building that cost £9,000.
Wow. That's a serious statement of success.
It was. And they didn't stop there. They also created the Benevolent Loan Society to help Jewish businesses. They understood that helping each other was key to their collective success. And then there's the story of Goldberg and Sons.
Oh, yes. The classic rags to riches story. From a single shop in Glasgow to over 100 stores across the UK. Amazing.
Incredible, right? And the best part is, the Goldberg family never forgot where they came from. They stayed involved in all sorts of charities and community organizations, always giving back.
That's wonderful. It shows that success doesn't have to mean forgetting your roots. In fact, it can mean giving back even more to the community that helped you succeed.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we're all connected. And that thread of interconnectedness runs through so many immigrant stories, including our next group, the Lithuanians.
Okay, I'm ready to hear about them. What brought them to Scotland?
Their story is really tied to the coal mining boom. Companies like Baird's needed workers, lots of them. So they started recruiting Lithuanians, promising them jobs and a better life.
And that led to those distinct Lithuanian communities like Little Lithuania in Belshil.
Exactly. A little piece of home in a new land, a place to speak their language, practice their traditions. It must have been comforting in the middle of all that industrial grime.
But I imagine their arrival, like with other groups, wasn't met with open arms by everyone.
You guessed it. Same old accusations came up, stealing jobs, undersetting wages. Those tensions with Scottish workers, they were always simmering just below the surface.
It's sad, but not surprising. It seems like that fear of the other taking what's yours is a constant throughout history.
It is. It says a lot about how we react to change, especially economic change. But there were also moments of unity, like the national strike of 1912.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, Lithuanian miners, they joined the strike alongside their Scottish comrades. They realized they were all fighting for the same thing: better wages, safer conditions.
Powerful stuff. It shows how shared struggles can really bring people together, regardless of their backgrounds.
Absolutely. It was a real challenge to those ingrained prejudices. Proof that solidarity can bloom in the most unexpected places.
But those divisions didn't magically disappear overnight, did they?
No, unfortunately not. Cultural misunderstandings still caused friction. For example, Lithuanians had these traditional celebrations that could last for days.
That's fun.
It was. But some Scots saw it as excessive drinking, which reinforced those negative stereotypes.
Ah, the clash of cultures. It's a reminder that what's normal for one group can seem strange or even offensive to another. It's all about perspective, isn't it?
It is. And to make matters worse, Lithuanians were often mistaken for Poles.
Adding another layer of confusion to their identity.
Exactly. It shows how ignorance and prejudice can go hand in hand. People get lumped together based on superficial similarities, and their unique experiences get lost in the shuffle.
And then World War I threw another wrench into the works, didn't it?
It did. Suddenly, Lithuanian men had this horrible choice: fight for Britain their new home, or go back to Russia, a place many had fled, and risk being drafted into the Tsar's army.
What a terrible dilemma, forced to choose between two loyalties.
Exactly. A lot of them ended up going back to Russia, which had a huge impact on their communities here. Families torn apart, businesses disrupted. Little Lithuania was never quite the same.
So even as they were trying to build a new life, world events came crashing down around them. It's a reminder that sometimes things are just out of our control.
It is. But even with all that hardship, they never forgot their heritage. They kept publishing Lithuanian newspapers, holding church services in their language, celebrating their traditions. They were determined to keep their culture alive.
That's powerful. It shows their resilience, their commitment to who they were, even in a new land.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Irish, Italian, Jewish, Lithuanian immigrants. What are some of the big takeaways for now?
Well, one thing that really stands out is how universal their hopes and dreams were. Whether they were running from poverty, persecution, or just looking for a better life, they all came to Scotland for the same reason: opportunity.
Classic immigrant story, right? Risk everything for a chance at a new beginning.
Exactly. And despite their different backgrounds, they often face the same obstacles: language barriers, cultural misunderstandings, job competition, and of course, prejudice.
The us versus them mentality seems like it never goes away.
It's a sad truth,
Yeah.
and it's why understanding history is so important, so we can learn from those patterns of fear and division and hopefully do better. But there's another side to the story too, a story of resilience, adaptation, and creating vibrant communities that enriched Scotland in countless ways. They've built businesses, supported each other, kept their traditions alive. They truly became part of the fabric of Scotland.
They did. Their stories are full of hardship, but ultimately, they're stories of triumph, of the human spirit's ability to overcome incredible odds.
It's a complex picture, for sure, but essential to understanding Scotland's past and present.
Absolutely. And it makes us ask some tough questions about how we as a society respond to immigration, both historically and today.
Right. What can we learn from these stories? How can we make sure Scotland stays a welcoming place for immigrants while also addressing the concerns that inevitably come up?
That's the million-dollar question, and maybe it's a question our listeners can think about as we continue to explore these fascinating stories.
Makes you think, doesn't it? All these stories, they're more than just facts and figures. It's about real people, real lives.
It is. Dreams, aspirations woven right into the fabric of their new home.
It's amazing when you think about it. The Irish, the Italians, the Jewish community, the Lithuanians, they all contributed so much to what Scotland is today. It wasn't always smooth sailing, but they left their mark.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Those iconic Italian ice cream parlors, those bustling Jewish businesses in the Gorbals.
Echoes of Gaelic, Yiddish, Lithuanian in the streets.
It's all part of the tapestry.
And even the tensions, the conflicts, they shaped Scotland too. Forced the country to grapple with questions of identity, of belonging, of what it really meant to be Scottish.
Absolutely. And those debates, they haven't gone away. They're still relevant today as we try to navigate immigration, diversity, inclusion.
So how do we make sure Scotland stays a welcoming place for immigrants? A place where they can thrive and contribute? Because obviously there are always going to be concerns.
Well, understanding our history is key, right? Recognizing the good and the bad, the complexities of Scotland's relationship with immigration.
Learning from the past.
Exactly. Acknowledging the contributions, but also learning from the mistakes, the prejudices.
And avoiding those easy narratives that pit us against them. The ones that just breed fear and resentment.
Exactly. It's about remembering our shared humanity, no matter where we're from or what language we speak.
Seeing diversity as a strength.
Yes. And creating a society where everyone feels like they belong, where everyone has a chance to succeed, where differences are celebrated, not feared.
A shared responsibility.
Right. We all have a part to play in building a more just and equitable society.
You know, these historical excerpts, they've given us so much more than just facts and dates. We've gotten a glimpse into the human heart, the struggles and triumphs, the hopes and fears of people who are just trying to build a better life.
It is incredibly powerful. History isn't just about the past. It's about understanding ourselves, where we come from, and what kind of future we want to create.
Well said. I think we've done a pretty good job of unpacking these stories. What a journey.
We have. It's been fascinating exploring all these lives, these destinies. It reminds us that the story of immigration is really just the story of being human.
And hopefully our listeners have come away with a better understanding of how these communities shaped Scotland and how their experiences still matter today.
I hope so too. It's a story worth remembering.
It really is. And on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the lives of immigrants in Scotland.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.